Hey, Lisa. Yeah, it's also on Mansfield Cable. I don't know.
If you're speaking right now, if you could mute yourself, please. Thank you.
Susan, are you ready?
You're
I'm ready.
on. Ready. You're on. Ten seconds.
Hello and good evening. My name is Kevin Dumas. I am your town manager here in the great town of Mansfield, and thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We have with us here tonight all of your town departments that are relative and as part of our town government. So as we go through and we get to certain parts of it, I'll be opening up for questions. Any questions that we may have for the general public, we'll ask, and we can transfer our attendees or our department heads. You can bring them over as a presenter and to be able to engage with you. And we have this opportunity with you because it's a great way to be able to have a little pre-town meeting review. Provides an opportunity to go over our warrant articles, but also some of the things that I think are important for us to bring to you as members of the general public. For those, whether you're watching on cable TV tonight, whether you're watching a rebroadcast or you're with us virtually, it's a great way to be able to go through and get your information prior to next Monday. The real town meeting will be here before you know it, Monday the 24th, and that's going to be over at the Xfinity Center at 885 South Main Street. And we're going to be out in the parking lot for our second time as we still continue, and we're coming out of COVID. But this is a wonderful way to be able to get together as a group tonight, kind of go through as a precursor for what we have on our agenda and what we'll be talking about. And it's important to note that, you know, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the voters in Mansfield and our registered voters coming out in full force in order to be able to deal with the town's business. This is the real deal. This is where the rubber hits the road, and really we wouldn't be here for all the hard work and determination of the town staff to make these things present. So I would be remiss if we didn't have the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit before we get into this tonight of the hard work and dedication of all of the school faculty and staff, all the town staff who've worked tirelessly. I mean, it's just a short time ago that when you really look back, you know, here we are, May 19, 2021, right? We're looking back at what happened after the first and second week of March 2020. Completely changed our lives and the way that we conduct ourselves. Look at this. We would have never been doing these virtual meetings and virtual presentations. You know, town staff, even though that we weren't open for a while, of the building open to the public, we're here remotely, but we're also here in person, keeping things together to make sure that we could continue to provide the services. But let me tell you, folks, it was a journey. We learned a lot, and we stuck together as a team to do what we do for you. And I'm so proud, and kudos to all of the staff. This is representative of a meeting that we just had with our staff outside in the South Common for a little update for a staff meeting. And the consistent message was heard by everyone. And that consistent message was, you know, thank you so much for helping me out with this project, with this initiative. You know, we're in this together, you know, and that's something that's very alive and strong here in Mansfield. And it makes me proud to be part of that, leading that Mansfield team, because we work on all of our projects and initiatives together. And that's how we're so successful. So whether you look at the achievements, even being remote end of last year with school into this school year, and now being back fully in person, whether you're looking at the goals and objectives that have been reached by all of our town departments, or the plethora of elections that were done underneath very difficult time constraints and difficult circumstances because of COVID, or you look at all the DPW projects that were ongoing, or the other additional accomplishments with our public safety departments, or things of bringing things out to the curb, marrying people outside of town hall, what you saw going on at curbside service at COA and the library, or our veteran services and trips to people at homes who are shut-ins and vaccinations. This team is second to none, folks, and I'm very proud of all of them. And it's a nice opportunity just to highlight that as we're kicking off tonight. So a gigunda kudos and thank you on behalf of the work that's done by all of our staff in Mansfield with our town and our school employees. You know, it's a very special group, and it really does emulate. We do whatever it takes. And that has been accomplished over the past year as we're entering into our new year. So congratulations to the team on a job well done. So Carrie, if we could turn over to our next slide, please. So as part of that team thing and what we're talking about here in town, it is a committed financial team as well. And so that's representative, select board, school committee, our finance committee, and all of our town management staff. And how we do that is we go through a series of consensus meetings for key financial decisions. We did that and we're repeating that. It's kind of like a rinse, wash, repeat of what we've done in the past in order to get to where we are at this point in time in building a fiscal year budget. And in this case, this is fiscal 2022's budget that we're going to be talking about here tonight, as well as performing extremely well under the current circumstances in fiscal 2021. There were financial reserves that were put into place and thinking, we're weathering for the storm. We ended up weathering quite well, and also putting to good use of the CARES Act funding that was in place, and also, making sure that if we didn't need it, we didn't spend it. So overall budgetary, what we expected, and with additional state aid, it is expected to be able to go through. And as our commitment from last year's consensus meetings, we are, as part of the fiscal 22 warrant, we will be, in adhering to our policies, returning funds to our stabilization fund. We had taken 1.5 million last year of our $4 million reserve fund. We had taken that to be able to set aside into and fund the fiscal 21 budget. We will be fully 100% returning those funds, but we will be asking for your support at town meeting on Monday. So again, well performing under fiscal 21. We're setting ourselves up for a good position in fiscal 22, and as part of what we're looking for moving forward for fiscal stability in 22 and beyond. So next slide, please. So it's also important as a refresher of where we've been. So our free cash that were certified last fall, and so that was back on September 15th, 2020, as you see on your screen, that was from the prior fiscal year. So that was fiscal 20 ending balance was 1.391 million of certified free cash. And for those who may be tuning in, what that means is that after all the expenses are paid and after all the revenues brought in at the end of the day, it's what literally is provided as a positive fund balance for undesignated fund balance, which is called, also known as free cash. And we can use that for any lawful purpose. And this is good to highlight exactly where we were. So you can see that we had allocated funding through, and that was at our special town meeting. That was November 7th. And that went towards the shortfall as anticipated. And that went to being able to cover the regional assessment for our parking revolving fund. That was $200,000 that we had set aside. Prior year bills, $5,078. Money that we set aside for 5 and 10 year revaluation and cyclical inspections for the assessor department of $30,000 and $40,000 respectively. Money that we set aside for uncompensated absences for $100,000. We put an additional money of reserve aside into the FinCom reserve account for approximately $791,000. And then we paid down 2 amounts of debt that we had remaining for the fire station improvements over at Plymouth Street for $125,000 to eliminate the remaining portion of that debt, as well as paying off 50% of the remaining Tower 1 repairs for the fire department of $100,000. So therefore the balance that we would have would be zero. But it's just good to refresh on what we did, where the money went, and why we did go through and be able to set aside that dollar amount. Next page, please. So for the fiscal 2022 operating budget, this shows where the money comes from. So the general fund reserves of where it comes from. So the allowable tax levy generates about 72 million. State aid is almost 22 million, so 21.929. Local receipts of 8.4 million. There's indirect costs of 678,000. Other interfund transfers for 172,000, and then rescue plan funding for revenue offset of 1.2 million. And that's where the entire amount comes to $104,755,215. I have a little background noise, so I would just ask that if anyone who's with us tonight, if you can just please make sure that your microphones are muted, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Next page, please. So this gets on to the next section of the budget, which goes into the general categories of where you find. So where do the dollars go? And that's an important question a lot of people have. And certainly for that, you can see the general government makes up 4.8 million, public safety 11.3, school expenses for education 56.2 million, the Department for Public Works Division 5.08 million, Human Services 794,000, Culture and Recreation 981,000, our debt service of $4 million, state assessments that we have to pay to the state that they charge us for of 2.3 million, insurance for a little over $1 million, employee benefits for 17.5 million, miscellaneous and transfers out of 120,000, an overlay for tax abatements for 385,000. And again, this total equals the revenue total. So a balanced budget of $104,755,215. Next page, Carrie. So part of the budget highlights, and also the superintendent will be doing her portion as well, underneath the schools portion of the budget. As it relates to the town side of the ledger, this budget requires no free cash and no stabilization funds to balance this budget. So the town's main stabilization fund is not being touched. And as if you recall a few moments ago, the 1.5 million that we borrowed last year is being repaid to the town's main stabilization fund. And again, no free cash is used to balance this budget. It assumes very conservative revenue projections. It's something that we hold near and dear to. And the thing that I really hold near and dear to personally as well is that we owe consistent town services to you. And that's something that I take very, very seriously. And I think that for our 24,000 residents in town, we owe that to you. And you shouldn't have to guess what's happening from one year to the next. So we do use very conservative revenue projections. And again, anything that's in excess of that would be a positive balance for us. And the fact that we're not adding new additional FTEs to our general government budget for fiscal 22. On the next page, you'll see as it relates to additional things, as it relates to assumptions that we make. So fiscal 22 new growth is forecasted that we have in our budget is consistent with what we think that the projections are going to be. So that's important. And again, that was established also at our consensus meetings. Our central factors remain equal. So the valuation increases across all property types, and our tax shift we're assuming stays the same at 1.34. And that's because we have a dual tax rate in town. And certainly this also assumes that all the financial articles that we'll talk about tonight that they would be voted as in all of the detailed motions that we'll be talking about. So as it relates to tax rate calculations specifically, it's approximately a little more than a 3% rate increase that you'll see on the next slide, and that's as it relates to the different sectors. So average residential bill would be approximately 3.4%, average commercial, industrial, personal property tax bill would be about 3.48 versus 3.49, assuming that we stay at the split. But the work of the assessing department will continue, and once values are certified, that they'll be submitted in the fall, we'll have a better idea where that falls, but just kind of gives a basic idea at this point in time of where we're looking at. So on the next slide, we get into the particular departments. And I just want to point out to everyone who may be attending tonight virtually, but it's also important to note that as the first slide before I came on tonight showed our website address, mansfieldma.com. On the Mansfield site, you can go to the quick links, go to town meeting. When you go to that side and to the website, you can be able to go through and see our budgetary data. And I think that's important because what you see here, instead of being here for a very, very, very long time and line item detail, our line item detail is available to you. It is online. And so when you go to the town meeting webpage on our website, you can be able to go. There's a call to action, the video that I did over at Mansfield Cable Access, but you'll also see there your breakdown. So there is a general fund PDF document. Inside that fund document, you'll see that it's broken down in the same format that you see here on your screen, but that you'll be able to dive down deeper. So you'll be able to see the specific line items as they're changing. This is a 30,000 foot view looking down, and this just grabs the department as a whole and it breaks it down between your personal services section, your general expenses for the department, and in any capital outlay. So again, while I can comment particularly on some of the shifts that you may find in the departments, I urge you to go online, go to the general fund PDF, and again, you'll see by department, it lays out every single line item all the way through. So we have that level of transparency with you. Again, this is the 30,000-foot view looking down. So as it starts off, these are in order by department number, which you see on the left, 114, 122 select board, 123 town manager. So select board expenses aren't changing from one year to the next. Fiscal 21 is where we are now. 22 is where we would be going and what we're requesting from you for July 1st. So when we get to the town manager department and you see the shift, I'd like to be able to explain, as I did at last June's town meeting, it's for the same reason. We have made sure that all of our centralized contractual increases for union negotiations are in one place. So we have 5 union contracts that are up now. Money has not been transferred out to the particular departments at this point in time. We're under union negotiations with all 5 unions. When the union contracts are fully ratified and approved, the money will leave. There's a reserve for personnel service adjustment that you will see in that detailed document that I referenced. And that's where all of the reserve money is held. So that until the union contracts are settled and the money is then dispersed into the lower items listed below by department, the personnel service adjustment line has the total amount that's set aside for union negotiations. So that dollar amount is reflected in the personnel service adjustment line. So in fiscal 21, we had an amount set aside. I had to also assume what the possible increases could be for fiscal 2022, and that had to be added to that dollar amount. So in that line item, you'll see that it's gone up by a couple $100,000 from where it was in 2021, and that's an important factor here as we're looking at that. And again, when you get down through the ending in town account at the bottom of the scene, smaller increases until we get further on in our presentation. So when we move to the next slide, you'll see the next section, and that again, you'll see in the Board of Assessors, okay, that there's in the personnel service section line, we had a change here because we have a new assessor for this fiscal year. So Dan Brogy replaced Nancy Highnote. Dan joined the team and was effective with us in July. So Dan was brought in at the rate of pay and that we found competitive to get Dan to come join our Mansfield team. So the difference between what Nancy was being paid and what Dan's being paid is reflective, in addition to our other staff person in the office and any other cost of living adjustment that had to take place per the existing step increase that may be in place is reflective in that account. And then also reflective of just some of the general contractual increases for the department that's reflective in that detailed breakdown underneath the PDF document attached here too. Under Department 145 and the Treasurer Collector, very minimal, again, just some small contractual increases in the department. Again, we'll see under 152, under Personnel, that's our HR department. We had foregone any department training in fiscal 21 as part of our COVID cutbacks. That is being asked to be returned. You can see the net increase of that of $15,000 to bring back staff development, which is important to us townwide. When we get down into information technology, so when we get down to the MIS section, again, a very, very small amount overall. Is actually a decrease in personnel services. However, that you will see other increases as it relates to that. So you'll see an increase of things that we've gone through. We've restored. Again, the largest increase you'll see is 100% increase because of $34,000. We had removed all capital equipment that was needed for the MIS department for COVID rollbacks. That is being asked to be restored for fiscal 2022, in addition to the other contractual increased expenses per our contracts. So that's not union contracts, but that's actually contracts that we have with outside vendors with the town. Next page, please. So again, town clerk, Department 161, the reductions that are in place is because of the fact that we don't have so many elections this year. So that can wind down a little bit, and you can see reflected in those categories for town clerk. Again, for 171 for conservation, it's going up. There is an approximate $5,000 increase in expenses for Conservation Commission. Caitlin has requested, as part of the Open Space Committee and the Conservation Commission, for maintenance of trails. So that increase is reflected in that department. Our trail usage has gone through the roof and become they were already used very well, but now they have increased exponentially by thousands of people throughout COVID. And we want to keep up. We did a 20,000 infusion from the reserve FinCom transfer in last calendar year, I mean, sorry. And that we're looking to be able to go through and keep the maintenance ongoing. That's the difference pretty much in conservation. Again, just a small contractual increase for planning and the planning department under 175. No changes under 176 for zoning board of appeals. Next page, please. And again, you'll see very negligent changes here for municipal committees under municipal building committee and PEG access changes for cable. This is dollars that we get from PEG access money that we go to Mansfield Cable Access, required to transfer. You will see an increase under Department 192. So for public buildings, you'll see that the fact that this is reflective of, again, we've seen an incredible uptick in usage. So we have additional grinding that has to take place in the expense side. And also under our part-time help, we've had to bring in additional part-time help to work the Mansfield Green, and that's reflective under Department 192. Next page, please. So here we get into our public safety section. Again, overall, we have people who are retiring, overall down in the police departments. So the overall, it's just up a negligible 0.49% increase over fiscal 21. We have increases to be reflective for maintenance of contracts for the fire departments, and just the regular contractual increases that are required under the personnel service section. Again, advance in degrees require some additional dollars, and just the regular contractual increases, and those employees that are eligible for their step increase. And again, the $10,000 increase were the additional expenses as related to the cost of outside contracts that were required, and a small reduction on the capital outlay side versus 21. And again, on the EMS side services for the fire department, we have Chief DeRosiers here if we need to be able to have any explanation on this side, but this is the increase in cost under maintenance and repair. We also have an increase in collections for data processing required for our EMS system. Also for EMS, this is budgeted for the first time of a $5,000 increase in this section. Previously, it was in public health. This has now been transferred over to the EMS department under Chief DeRosiers. And also there was a line item in the fire department that was transferred down into EMS to be appropriate. It was moved from the fire budget to the fire budget, went down. Also some increases for some $400 increases and a $3,000 increase due to cost increases in vehicle supplies, and also in EMS other supplies are reflective in this section versus fiscal 21 to 22. Next page, please. So again, public safety dispatch, we no longer have dispatch. We belong to regional SEMREC, and that's our SEMREC assessment, so no change there. Only contractual increases for STEP and any cost of living adjustment that's required there for inspectional services. And again, under emergency management, very change, as only $500 change for your total public safety at 2.47% total. Next page, please. Education personal services. You can see there's an increase of 1.25 million, but we'll be getting into a discussion that we have with our superintendent. So you'll be hearing from our superintendent, Teresa Murphy, shortly. She'll be getting into the discussion of her budget, and a whole series of great slides talking about 21 into 22 and the COVID related needs and how we're funding that moving forward. So we'll be talking about that shortly. And again, an increase in, we call it undistributed, so it's an increase in our assessments and also with our vocational schools that you'll see here, and some small increases as it relates for personnel as related to one portion of our budget here for total education. Next page, please. So you'll see here for DPW administration and expenses, we're going through, and if you bear with me just for one moment, on the administrative side, we have mainly the increase on the personnel service section. We have our DPW director, Lee Azanara. Lee's going to be retiring effective March 2022 in this new upcoming fiscal year. And as part of our training, getting ready for his replacement, we want to make sure that we're providing the necessary overlap for the training and expertise. This is a very large department overseeing DPW administration, public buildings, parking, water, sewer, and the highway division. This is a really, and engineering as well. This is a really big department, a lot of responsibility. So the successful candidate will have the opportunity to be able to go through and to train with Lee prior to his departure, and at least getting a one cycle of budget and capital improvements and getting the full training and transitions in place. We're doing this not only in DPW. Our water division superintendent, Kurt Gaffney, will also be retiring. However, it'll be a little bit earlier towards the end of this calendar year. And we're also providing for that same type of overlap for training and reassurance for these two important positions. And on the expense side, that you'll find in DPW administration, this is purely the increase in our trash contracts, disposal, and processing. So that's important to note in general. Under Department 421, under the Highway Division, again, contractual COLA and step increases for our contracts that we have in place, and then general cost increases for the cost of doing business with outside contracts that we owe for fiscal 2022, and those are the changes for highway. And you will see a minus here on capital outlay, and this is because in the fire department, this is the last year of a grant. We had been raising money and putting this aside that we would eventually transfer when the grant ran out. But in the meantime, while we were raising it, so we wouldn't have a fiscal cliff, we had a very good place to put that, and that was going to the actual capital outlay for our roads and sidewalk programs, and Mr. Cook was using that for our roadway construction and sidewalk construction dollars. So that leaves his budget this year. He'll still have his road bond and his Chapter 90 money to be able to use for the work that we do. However, this $179,000 goes over to the increase that you saw in the fire department to replace the grant that was paying for some of our staff that we had hired a number of years ago. Snow and ice stays the same here, as you see under Department 423, 425 under vehicle maintenance, and again, any of the contractual related costs that we have here, and that you saw a $5,000 budget reduction in order for us to meet our budget reductions that we put in place. And level funding, Department for Town Fuel, Department 429. Next page, please. Again here, public health, we referenced that there was an increase in an uptick in the fire department. So you saw a large amount that went out. And so a dollar amount that previously had been for services that now the fire EMS does represents the change in the Board of Health expenses. So again, that's all the community paramedicine that Chief Justin and the fire department EMS personnel provide. Instead of that used to be provided by community VNA, is now being done internally by our own staff. So the money was in 21 in the Board of Health. It's now being budgeted fully under EMS in the fire department. Again, negligible cost, you'll see reduction for COA under Department 541. You'll see an increase under veteran services, and that's purely just the amount of veterans aid for more assistance to be estimated to be given in fiscal 22, thus the change under Department 543. And again, just the contractual increases under Social Services Department 549. Next page, please. Under this, that you can see the major change under Department 610 for library is under employee benefits. Employee benefits has left the library budget and it's come on to the town side. So all town-wide benefits you'll see coming up in a couple of slides are all consolidated into one place. for the overall management and allocations. So that it leaves the library budget, but it goes into the town benefit side. Again, under very small amounts, again, and just the contractual increases that we have for park and recreation, and no changes in the other budgets that we have listed below for total culture and recreation. Carrie, next slide. And again, we get to our debt service section. So you'll see long-term debt principal, that the expenses associated just up slightly from 2.403 to 2.476. Our long-term debt and interest did fall overall. So you went up 72,000 one place, down 134,000. And then our short-term is up 78. So overall, it was 3.996 million. It is slightly up by $16,600 for fiscal 2022. Next slide, Carrie. This is our side of what we owe for the state expenses. So these are assessments that the town is charged for. So this charter school assessments and other things that we're charged for. This is where it hits. So this is Department 820 for state expenses. So the state's charging us 9.79% more than they did in 21. And so these are the line items that represent what we have to pay the state in fiscal 22 that we put on notice for. So this is where it's represented. Our county charge goes up by just a little over 2.5%. This is 2.8, $11,872, and this also covers the expenses associated with Bristol County Aggie as well. And other governmental charges here, this $4,474 is reflected in another portion of the budget, and this is our SERPED assessment. And this is the Southeastern Regional Planning Economic Development District. We all belong part of it as part of our region, and this is all part of our transportation planning that we do for our entire region of Mass DOT District 5. We're all a part of that. They give us a tremendous asset, and we're glad to be a part of that group, but now it's reflected in the general government portion of the budget. Next slide, please. And then you'll see what I referenced coming up for employee benefits. So of course, this is, we've under employee benefits of the 897 going up, that represents a 16.62%. That also includes and reflected of the increase coming in of the $122,000 from the library mainly. And that's an important factor here. And then workers' compensation slightly up. Some additional cases that we have in 21 that we expect to move forward into fiscal 2022. Also our school benefits, they're slightly down. Our property liability insurance is being estimated at 591. And then also our interfund transfers are 120, which is reflected in an earlier portion of our presentation. So overall of this section is 5%. But then we also look at our total general fund of 104 million, that this is going up by 3.91 as compared to fiscal 2021 appropriated. So as we move on to the next, I think that just before we bring on our school superintendent, Teresa Murphy, I'd like to open it up for any questions at this point in time on the general fund budget as presented to you and as reflected in our detailed munis document and the general fund budget on our website. If anyone has any questions at this point in time, I would ask that you please raise your hand option, or to be able to turn on your microphone and to be able to ask if there's any questions. So Carrie, do you know if anyone has their hand raised?
Give me 1 second. I just had to get out of the PowerPoint.
No problem.
I do not see anybody with their hand raised.
All right, perfect, Carrie. Thank you so much. So while Carrie transitions back into the PowerPoint presentation, Teresa, good to see you, Superintendent. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And again, I know that I referenced this earlier on with all the town staff, but you certainly the head of our schools, our public school system, with you, the assistant superintendents, the principals, all the faculty and staff. Just a sincere thank you again, personally, that I get to witness you on the screen here and being with us virtually. Really appreciate the dedication that everyone has put in above and beyond what has been in the past. strictly dealing with the COVID related things and still reaching all these little souls of over 3,000 kids that are responsible for their continuing education. And so again, a sincere, heartfelt thanks for that. I truly, truly, truly appreciate that. And it means a lot. So right before that, Teresa, I did forget a couple of little slides. So Carrie's getting me back on track. So a couple little capital improvement things. So Carrie, if you want to make that larger, that'll be great. Because there are a couple of things here just to be able to go over. You're going to see underneath our capital improvements that there are a couple of things that we're asking for. And so in our section that we have in here for the schools, we're closing out a couple of articles that we have. I'm sorry. This is the 140,000. Perfect. So we have 2 sped buses that are going to be replaced that are in need. And again, these are replacing things that we already have. So this isn't adding to our fleet, just replacing. So the 2 sped buses, the 2 11-year-old buses, 140,000 that we're asking for support for the school department, in addition to a needed plow truck replacement, and that's 16 years old at a cost of $50,000. So we'll be asking that for a loan authorization for consideration. In addition to our police department, so Chief Sellon and our deputy chief and crews, we have a cruiser replacement program. And so these are for the cruisers and administrative vehicles. We had pushed this off last year due to COVID, so we're currently slated to replace 4 vehicles. Again, these are 6 old cruisers being replaced. Again, it's an authorization. So for $232,000 is our request is for that. In addition to the water division, which would be supported by the Water Enterprise Fund, it's to replace a backhoe that's 19 years old. And that estimate with Kirk Gaffney, our water division superintendent, is for $140,000 for the total of what we'll be requesting from general government from the water enterprise for a total of $562,000. And on the next slide, we're needing some improvement dollars, and we're funding that in a various ways. So for the first 2, we're closing out some previous articles that the superintendent had with Assistant Superintendent Ed Donahue and Matt Jocks for facilities. We're closing out some old articles that we no longer need the money for, and we're repurposing those into school-related projects. One of them is to finish needed improvements that are going to be under construction for the school security check-in stations. So that'll provide an extra $138,724.75 to that project, so that they can accurately get that done and completed while students are not in the building. Also, there's extra money that we're going to continue to add in to their consistent paving and concrete repair program. So that's $70,584.87. Use every penny that we can. And then also 2 new things. As you well know, every year we ask for additional monies on top of our Chapter 90 dollars. Chapter 90 dollars are what we use for sidewalk and roadway improvements in town. It's only about $700,000, folks, and it doesn't go very far. So in order to keep our roads in the 80th percentile, we put an extra $2 million in every single year into the custody of our DPW director and our highway division's manager, Mark Cook. So $2 million is being requested again, as we do every year. In addition to the recreation department under the direction of Sherry Gernon, and that we're asking for a loan authorization to replace completely the Plymouth Street playground, and that's for $600,000 for a total of $2.809 million for fiscal 22 for these other capital projects. So now that I've made it through that, in conclusion, when you go to the next page, you'll see that we're looking and that 1 through 15 on the motions, again, that they're updated as of tonight, that are on our web. That Articles 1 through 15 and the associated motions are financial in nature. 16 through 33 are non-financial, but they're still extremely important to either the town or the citizens petitioners or the planning board. So we ask that people please stay to the end of the meeting, because we do need votes of support for these items as well, or votes against, but we need your votes. And then please ask any questions if any of the wording is unclear as we make our way through this presentation, or when we ask you to join us in town meeting. So at this point, now officially, Superintendent, I'm going to turn this over to you. And Teresa, again, thank you so much for what you do. really appreciate the hard work and dedication of all of your staff too. So we really appreciate it. So welcome. And at this point, I'm going to turn this over to you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you very much for your kind words. You are a town manager who is very involved with our schools, and so you know firsthand how hard our staff, our students, our families have worked this year to be able to educate during the COVID experience. So thank you very much for the comments and also for your constant support of our schools. It is an honor for me to be here this evening to present our proposed FY22 budget. And next slide, please. Thank you. The FY22 budget is the financial representation of the cost of education, which my administration requires in order to execute our school improvement plans. It will position the district to improve our academic performance during these very challenging times. We also understand the financial constraints of the town, and we strive to manage our resources very effectively while still providing the high level of education that the district has consistently achieved and that our community expects from us. The proposed budget for FY22 is $54,814,117. This represents an increase of 4.07% over the FY21 budget. Next slide, thank you. The salary and wage budget request is $44 million. That's an increase of 2.94% over fiscal year 21. This represents a level service budget, meaning that meets contractual obligations with minimal staffing increases. The goods and services budget request includes an increase in technology due to the increase of our one-to-one initiative, the one-to-one device initiative, as well as the hardware, software, and network related costs for increases. The special education budget is $3,860,846, is up $204,000 or 5.6% over FY21. This reflects our best estimate of the number of students in out-of-district special education placements and the anticipated tuition increases. It also assumes using $1.5 million of the circuit breaker funds. I should mention that circuit breaker revenue has decreased, and that unfortunately further depletes our tuition revolving account. Next slide.
I'm sorry, hold on one
okay.
second. I
No, that's
could hear
fine.
somebody on the phone line. I was trying to fix it.
That's fine. I can see where your cursor is, one row down here, right there. Yep, thank you. This slide that Carrie has moved us to identifies the major budget categories for the schools, and it shows the fiscal year 2021 budget and the budget as well as our proposed budget for fiscal year 22. And it also identifies the difference in both dollars and percentage between the 2 years. As you can see, most of our schools and departments have minimal changes between the 2 fiscal years, but I will point out a couple of the larger than usual increases. The technology line is a 76.52% increase. And so that, in addition to the factors that I mentioned on the previous slide, that is the increased numbers of devices and the peripherals that were needed to support the remote and hybrid learning environment during COVID. The decision was also made to move technology out of the capital budget, which is how it's been funded for the past few years, into the school's operating budget. And that has been a decision that was made in consultation with the budget subcommittee, which of course includes representatives from the school committee, the select board, and also the Finance Committee. So that increase is the percentage increase in our operating budget, again, reflects what had been previously funded through capital. We all agree that funding it through the operating budget is really the optimal place for it. However, we had used the capital funding for 2 or 3 years recently. Two other lines that show increase: Mansfield High School with a 12.48% increase and Falters Middle School with a 10.1% increase are also higher than usual. And that also reflects a decision to move, this time, textbooks out of capital funding into our operating budget. And then you'll see the Robinson School further down. Robinson School reductions are due to the completion of the purchase of the new literacy and math program materials, and many of those were one-time purchases. So this is a year that is certainly, we reap the benefits of those past few years when we invested heavily in the Robinson School literacy and math program. So thank you for that. Our goods and services subtotal, it shows the increase of 8.97% over last year's budget. Salaries and wages subtotal shows the increase of 2.94%. That is due again to contract obligations, and in a moment you'll see the positions that we are funding. They will be shown on the next slide. And finally, the bottom line, $54,814,117 is up 4.07% over the current year's budget. So as I mentioned, the next slide, we will take a look at some positions. These are being funded through the operating budget, and they are staffing requests that we are making. The first 3 are new requests. The first is an instructional technology coach, which is a position that supports our teachers and our students with all of the technology that has been put into their hands. Now, certainly, we're hoping that next year will be a return to normalcy in our classrooms, and there won't be, again, hopefully, the remote work that so many students and families and teachers have had to work with this year. However, we are taking away a lot of learning from the technology that has been put into our students and teachers' hands. And so we continue to want to improve our practices and to continue to learn. We do have one technology coach in the district, and we would like to add one to support our technology plan. This is a position that had been put into our long-range, multi-year strategic plan for digital learning and technology integration. The second position that you see, excuse me, is for Robinson School physical therapist. We did have a physical therapist retire last year, and at the time it was recommended that we reduce the full-time position to a 0.8 position. What we have found is that with increased service needs, we do need to restore that position to a 1.0. So it would be asking for a 0.2 of a position. At Rolling Green, we are asking for a 0.4, so almost a half-time school psychologist. This is a school psychologist who would help us to maintain compliance with the education evaluations that we need to do, and also with the increased needs that we're seeing at the younger grades. You might recall that last year we had an additional 60 students scheduled to join the Robinson School. those numbers aren't quite as high at Rolling Green, but again, we are having increased numbers of students enrolled in our preschool and elementary school. And in the past, we have had a shared position, a school psychologist who would divide time between Robinson and Rolling Green. We do need to increase that staffing. So it would be a psychologist who would be exclusively to support the Rolling Green preschool. And again, our preschool is primarily a school that is designed to meet the needs of children with disabilities on IEPs. However, we're very grateful that we have peer models who are also in the school. So our numbers continue to increase at Rolling Green. The next three positions are what I'm calling restoration, staffing restoration. These are positions that we reduced over the last couple of years. The science position has been really a few years since we had the science teacher, that number of science teachers in our high school. And what we're finding is that we are not able to offer the same level of courses as our neighboring high schools. There are some, such as environmental science, that we are missing out on. This year with COVID and the remote schooling, it really highlighted the need for our science department to have that additional teacher. And then the two world language teachers, one is at the high school, will be a French teacher and a Spanish teacher at Walters Middle School. And those teachers, those positions were reduced last year because we just did not really know what the funding would be like during the COVID era. So we did lay off teachers last year. This would be helping us to bring back to where we were pre-COVID. So again, it's a total 4.6 FTEs that we would be staffing within our operating budget. And then the next slide is going to show you COVID-19 staffing, services, and supplies. You know, our schools were hit exceptionally hard. I know every department in a municipality was hit during COVID. Schools, probably because of the numbers of people who are served within our school and all of the families who support their children, I think it was very apparent that schools, not just in Mansfield, but throughout our nation, really had very difficult time being able to provide the services, staffing, and supplies that we needed. The federal government is funding what they're calling ESSER grants. They are elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund grants, and they are meant to provide the support that schools need to follow up on COVID. So in that area, we have the three S's, staffing, services, and supplies. Some of these represent long-term needs and some shorter-term needs. The grant money, and we are always seeking out grant money, but the ESSER funds have been made available to school districts, and they are really meant to support us. Hopefully not just the fall this year, but we have money that we are looking to hold for FY23. So with what we're looking to do next year to be able to mitigate the impact on learning caused by the hybrid learning, the remote learning, the high absences due to students needing to quarantine if they were a close contact to someone who was positive, if they were a close contact at home or in school. We had many students were absent, much more than they ordinarily would be. And so there has been an impact on student learning. So when we talk about interventionists and specialists, as you see our top two positions on math interventionists at Robinson, JJ, and Qualters Middle School, a reading specialist at the middle school, we're talking about people who are going to work with students who are struggling, be able to provide them with remedial services, be able to provide tutoring, be able to work with small groups and pulling students out of their classrooms to work with them. The specialists can move into the classroom and support students. And we believe that providing these supports will certainly mitigate the impact that COVID has had on our student learning. The bridge program that you see listed under long-term needs at Mansfield High School, the bridge program is a specialized program to support students who are experiencing some challenges, maybe a long-term hospitalization, they're coming back to school after that, or for other needs. And we are looking to have a paraprofessional who could support that program. The program is staffed by a social worker and counselors, and so a paraprofessional being able to support the students will be most appropriate. We also have staffing, which is considered what we consider short-term needs. For example, this year we hired 2 additional custodians. Those custodians were responsible for going to different schools. For example, the restrooms, the high-touch services had to be cleaned much more frequently than is usually typical in a school, because if you remember back in the fall and winter, we really didn't know, even at that time, how the disease was transmitted. Our custodians have done a dynamite job, and the 2 we hired this year, we look at that as being a short-term need that hopefully after next year, then we would be going back to our regular pre-COVID staffing for that particular department. Substitutes. This year we had to hire many, many more substitute teachers and substitute paraprofessionals, substitute nurses. We did that because, again, the absences on the part of staff were oftentimes higher because of the fact that if they had been a close contact to someone who was a positive, then they needed to be out of the building for at one time 14 days, then it was reduced to 10 days, but people had reasons to be out of school more often than usual. You know, we kept telling our staff members, teachers, and all of our staff that if they were feeling sick, then they needed to stay home. We were very careful, and I believe that the numbers of cases and the numbers of people impacted by COVID was far less than it could have been. We had no in-school transmission, which is amazing. But again, to be able to accomplish that, we needed to hire additional substitutes. We also had to staff what we call it, basically a remote cohort. We had teachers and paraprofessionals who, rather than working with students in a classroom, oftentimes that person was in a classroom, but they were working exclusively with students who were at home. We had about 10% of our population, about 400 students, were educated in the home. Many of them have their own medical issues that needed to be at home, or they live with someone who was health compromised. So substitute teachers was a high expense this year, and we look at it as possibly being the same next year. Among the COVID services that we have using some of those ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grant funds for special education, compensatory services related to COVID-19. We have $154,000 identified there. Doesn't mean we will absolutely need all of that funding, but we have it for the issues that come up in the area of special education over the next year. Summer Achievement, that is it's a name we used for one of our summer school programs, and we had increased that by $25,000. And certainly our summer school programs this year will be increasing in length of the number of days that a summer school program is being offered, and the number of students who will be served. We as I mentioned earlier, we do seek out alternative funding. So we have $25,000 that we can utilize from our ESSER 2 or 3 funds. However, we also apply for grants. We applied for a grant that has brought in $32,000 for our Qualters Middle School summer school program. So again, as we look at these COVID-related expenses, we are hoping that, not all of these funds have to be expended, but we will be ready for them. The moving expenses that you see, $40,000. We had to move out of our schools 33 truckloads of furniture and classroom supplies and classroom rugs, because there were COVID requirements that we had to meet for the safety and health of our school. The social distancing required we move so much furniture, file cabinets, you name it, out of our buildings. And our teachers have done well. They knew at the beginning of the year what was going to be going out, and they had to be able to figure out their materials so that they knew that what went out in the spring wasn't coming back, or rather what went out in the summer wasn't coming back. Now, what's interesting is that when we were able to reopen to fully 5-day-a-week in-person learning in all of our schools, we did have to already move some of those materials back into the school so that we had enough desks to serve the students. Remember, everything had to be socially distanced. Our students had to be so many feet apart from each other, which meant that, in some cases, half the furniture in the room was out. So we moved 33 truckloads out, and we're going to have to move it all back in. So we have funded $40,000 as comparable to what it cost us to move it out. As I said, we've already been able to move some back in a little bit at a time. The supplies, we consider the PPE, the personal protection equipment, $206,000 is what we funded. And we estimated that cost. It is based on this year's usage. And again, things are definitely looking up in COVID. I mean, even mask wearing at this point is that guidance is being revised. So hopefully we don't need to expend that amount on PPE, but we need to be ready in case we do. And again, that is coming from the federal funding for this purpose. And one final note, $206,000, but it's interesting that, again, we, as in the town of Mansfield, we will seek out alternative funding whenever we can. And just recently, MEMA, the Massachusetts Emergency Management, was giving out PPE for schools. I mean, there was just a little blurb in one of our Department of Ed newsletters. Matt Jacques quickly reached out and was able to get $10,000 worth of free PPE. So we are working hard to be cognizant of the resources that the town provides us. We're very grateful for what the town and how the town supports our schools. And with that, I am open to your questions. And Carrie will check to see if there's anyone looking to ask.
So if anybody wants to raise their hand to ask a question, I do not see anybody's hand raised at the moment. Nope.
Very
All right,
good.
Superintendent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Hope to see everyone at town meeting. If you do, please stop me and say hello. Thank you.
See you. Excellent. And now we move on to the motions part of our presentation. So Carrie's going to bring back the PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to be able to continue our discussion and quickly try to be able to go through and look at our motions and what they represent. So just shortly, that'll be coming up for you. So you notice that in the beginning, there were multiple motions that make up the support that we need to provide for our general government budget. So as part of that, one of the things that we have to do is to be able to, there's multiple funding sources. So when you go into Article 1, Motion 1, this is requesting dollars for $139,000 be appropriated to be used by me to offset a portion of our health insurance cost. So you saw that that was a very hefty number in the other portion of the budget. Certainly that this goes to be able to add towards that. So we'd be requesting the use of that for Article 1, Motion 1. When Carrie shows us the next slide, it's what makes up the town's portion. Schools are in a separate motion. So you'll see in Article 1, Motion 2, this is for the total revenue sources that we need for the 47 million that we need for the town's budget. And when she clicks over to the next page, it just shows where it goes. And it's the general government departments, and then it's the snow and ice debt service for the total offset of the 47 million.
Can I just interrupt? I'm sorry for 1 second. Thomas, if he could please mute himself. I am unable to, and that is where we're getting some feedback sound from.
Perfect. So Thomas, if you can hear us, can you please mute yourself? That'd be great. Thanks, Gary. So when we move on to Article 2, we can go on to is Article 2, Motion 1. You'll see that it's the moving and what Superintendent Murphy needs to be able to run our public school system. That's the 54.8 million. And this is what's needed to run the school department for the town's portion of the budget of the 104 million. 54.8 million will be going to the Mansfield Public Schools if approved. Article 3 will be passed over, so we will not be taking, it's unnecessary for any action. Article 4 is important. We're so fortunate to have our own municipal electric department here in Mansfield, and in order to do that, and to provide electricity and services to our customers, we need to be able to go through and allow to have those budgets approved for expenditure and to be able to raise the revenue necessary. And that's Article 4. Article 5 is not needed, so asking for that to be spent over. Article 6 are our enterprise funds. So motions 1 through 5 for the various water, sewer retained earnings, sewer enterprise, airport enterprise, and parking enterprise funds. So the next several pages, when Carrie goes to the next one, you'll see what motion 1 is. And this is to be able to carry through for the $5.5 million that's necessary to run the water enterprise fund. And you can see on the next page that it'll bring up our actual budget for by section. The increase associated pretty much predominantly for this is due to the debt associated with dealing with PFAS, and that's the debt associated with Kate Springs. We move on to motion 2. This is to rescind a vote we took back in back in November at our special town meeting. And what it did is it took the sewer retained earnings. We had set a lot of money aside to a reserve fund just in case we needed it. We don't, and we actually need a portion to subsidize the budget. So we're just asking to rescind it. And by doing that, it makes it available for appropriation again. So that's the simple thing here. So therefore, in motion 3, you'll see that we're asking people to approve the $6.5 million total sewer enterprise fund budget, 6.3 in revenue, and then asking for it to be supplanted by 232,000 of retained earnings. And again, when you just go to the next page, you'll see the sewer enterprise fund budget. And there, as I highlighted on your screen, pretty much it's only some contractual increases and some benefit changes. And other than that, it's just a small increase of 2.3% for fiscal 22. Motion 4, it highlights the $184,000 worth of revenue and then the expenses associated with the airport commission to run our airport. And so you'll see again on the next page below, you'll see the broken out section there. And you can see that the difference in capital outlay is predominantly some dollars used for some one-time items that comes down to actually a reduction from 21 into 22. Under motion 5 is the parking enterprise fund. So that's taking care of all our municipal parking lots and expenses associated with them. And you can see when you go into the next page, you can see the actual budget breakdown as presented here. And again, additional budgetary reductions just because of the fact there's not high utilization in our parking lots. So again, that was down like airport from the year before. Article 7 is something that we don't need. So we don't need to raise appropriate for any unpaid bills. We don't have any. So 7's passed over. Also, there's nothing that we have to do for Article 8. So nothing with the reval for 8 or 9. And we're going to be dealing with 8 and 9 in the fall. So we'll be back to be able to deal with those, but that's not something that we have to do right now. Those are space holders if we had to. And so what we do need to is to move on to Article 10. So Article 10, and this is what we talked about to repurpose some money to go towards other purposes. So you'll see that we're asking to free up some money that had been previously appropriated for some projects, and that we're going to be putting them to other projects. So when Carrie moves to the next slide, you'll see of where that's going from, right? So we're taking it from, we're closing out, and we're asking, as I highlighted as earlier part of my presentation, to go towards school security check-in stations and also district-wide paving. And again, the two of those added up together comes to $209,309.62. Our next motion, when we go through into motion, and these are where, thank you, Carrie, this is where they're actually coming from. So we're closing out all these old projects that date back 2016, 19, 17, 18 that we don't need, and we're asking it to be put forth into those two projects. Again, security check-in stations and district-wide paving. When we come into motion 2, this was the annual road bond we talked about. And so this would be providing an additional $2 million. This is something that we do every single year to keep our roads and sidewalks to the 80th percentile. And so we'll go on to motion 3. Motion 3 is something that we're really excited about. This does two things. One, it provides the dollars that are necessary for a new capital project. Thank you to the CIP committee who's been involved, and also for the support from our select board and from the finance committee. This provides the opportunity to replace entirely the playground with a new state-of-the-art playground at the Plymouth Street Recreational Complex. This also has the necessary language that continues onto the next page, that if we are awarded a grant, that could be applicable towards the project as well. So we're looking for support for Sherry Gernon and the Recreation Commission to be able to get a brand new playground over at Plymouth Street, something that's terribly needed. And that's something that was talked about when I was brand new, when I arrived here in 2018, and we're excited to bring that capital project to the forefront. And again, thanks to all involved on that. Motion 4. It goes into some other items that are needed. And again, this was something that was highlighted as it relates to our capital improvement program. Talked about the 2 sped buses for the school plow truck, the police cruiser replacement. And again, we replace so many every year. This is for 1 backhoe in the water department, and also the water meters and radio readers for $60,000. So we're asking for those sums to be raised so that we can replace those things. And on to the next motion. This would be for Article 11. And this would be anything that had to do with some old borrowings, if we had to be able to remove authorizations, unissued balances, and that's to be passed over for Article 12. We do not need that. Article 11. Article 12 presents the opportunity to provide 100% of the available real estate tax exemptions as described under Mass General Law. And that's something that the assessor himself and also Donna in the assessor's office go through on an annual basis. But without this, we can't offer the 100% opportunity. So this is something that allows us to do that. And that's something we do every single year. Article 13 is another annual thing that we have to do. And as required by Mass General Law 4453F and a half, for under revolving funds, we have to approve the annual expenditure limits for these revolving funds. And so we're asking for the approvals. These are the same as 21. We're asking to the repeat in fiscal 2022. Also, the fact, you recall in the next article, under Article 14, this is to repay the town's full stabilization account. But the 1.5 million that we borrowed, we said we promised to pay it back. We're paying it back in Article 14 as long as everyone approves. We do not need Article 15. And Article 16 is something that's really exciting. This is an opportunity for the town of Mansfield to join the green communities. And so I'm sure some people have heard a lot about this. There are a lot of separate slides that are going to be gone over in detail at our annual town meeting on Monday. Lisa Sullivan will be with us from the Department of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So she's going to be with us talking about that. So I'm not going to go into great detail on this. However, here's the basics of it. Right now, there's 290 municipalities out of 351 who've been designated and signed up for the Green Communities program. And in essence, the town agrees that it can, over 5 years, reduce its carbon footprint by 20%. And by doing that, the state allows you to have an annual allocation to be able to go towards helping you towards those goals and objectives. And for us, it's a couple $100,000. It also provides the opportunity for annual grants on top of your annual allotment to be able to be competitive toward your initiatives to become more green. So it's a fantastic opportunity for the town. It does require you to adopt the stretch code, and the stretch code is an additional layer on top of the building code, and it has some additional requirements. It's not a deal breaker by any means at all, but it provides the opportunity to make sure that you're having the most energy efficient home as possible when you're constructing new construction. This is exempt for building modifications, renovations, and repairs. Okay, they're exempt from the stretch code. It's only for something that's brand new residential construction or commercial construction, less than 100,000 square feet or greater than 40,000 square feet for conditioned spaces. So again, Lisa Sullivan's going to be going through all of these. So Carrie, you can be able to tab through these slowly in order to be able to get on to the next portion, but we look forward to seeing Lisa with us on Monday. It brings us up in the end to Article 17 and 18. These items are going to be passed over. And the reason why we're going to be taking these up in the fall. So we're going to pass over 17 and 18, but we will be taking advantage of Article 19. So this is something that's being added as a new general bylaw. It's being recommended, and this is for the registration and maintenance of abandoned buildings, so we can avoid situations like the town had experienced with the Payne School, for example. That's the importance of Article 19. So we'll be going through that in more detail on Monday. And as we move to Article 20, this is the needed vote. We had taken a vote originally at special town meeting on November 7th. And so this is to provide for any new, to amend, replace, or revise the updated plan that was really more than 3 years ago, and all of the right-of-way and necessary easements that are necessary for the expanded rail trail. For those who have been following this project, the rail trail is going to get extended from the airport, and it's going to go all the way down into the town of Norton, almost to the city of Taunton by the industrial park. So this is something that's really great, all being funded for with federal money, federal and state money. We're really excited about this project. It'll be advertised in July of 2022 for construction purposes, and hope to kick off within the year after that. But this is something really exciting, but this is necessary. So that's Article 20. Article 21. At this point in time, we're getting into the planning board sponsored articles. So I know that Sean Burke is with us here tonight. Sean's our planning director. So Sean, I know that you were gracious enough with Jen Crotty Davis today to come up and provide the explanations of the smaller amounts of this. But Sean, are you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Sean. So we're on Article 21 as it relates to the 5G explanation. So I just wanted to figure if you can go through 21 through 24 with us, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. Articles 21 and 22 are housekeeping articles. Article 21 specifically is to add 5G, that's fifth generation wireless communications, to as an allowed use to the airport zone. That was inadvertently left off the town meeting article in June of last year at the annual town meeting. So we hope to add that at town meeting on Monday night to take care of that oversight. Article 22 is of a similar housekeeping article. What this would do would be to amend the zoning bylaw to allow adaptive reuse of historic structures in both the business floor zones and and the transit-oriented development zone, that area around the train station, by special permit. At the time of the adoption of adaptive reuse, the business floor zone did not exist, nor did the transit-oriented development zone exist. So this is an amendment that would seek to allow that important use, the adaptive reuse of historic structures in both the business floor zone and the TOD zone by special permit. So Article 23, titled Site Plan, is going to be passed over. And the reason for that is the planning board wants to do some additional work on the wording of this particular provision of the site plan submission requirements. And we'll see this again in the fall. Article 24 is the floodplain bylaw. And I think it's very important that I tell you what it isn't before I tell you what it is. It's not an amendment to the floodplain zones. It's not an amendment to the floodplain maps. It's what we're seeking to do is adopt similar definitions and procedures that conform to the NFIP program, that the National Flood Insurance Program, and as recommended by the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. As Mr. Dimas just mentioned, there's 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth, and quite a few of them use different definitions. So the amendments in Article 24 seek to put us on the same page with NFIP and with MEMA. So our definitions are the definitions that they use in defining the various floodplain zones and in procedure for seeking relief for a variance in the floodplain. So this really seeks to, even though it's an extensive amendment, put all cities and towns, eventually all cities and towns, using the same definitions and the same procedures to administer the state program and the federal flood insurance program. So that's really the essence of Article 24. It's not a change to the zones. It's not a change to the maps. It's simply redoing definitions and better outlining the variance procedure. So that's Articles 20 through 24. And I think you then move on to the citizens petitions.
No, I have two next, Sean. So hold on one sec.
My bad.
Not a problem. Sean, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
So Articles 25 and 26 have to do with the Mansfield Fire Department and Mansfield Police Department. We're requesting, as we have bargained with the union, to leave civil service. And so what this does is that this helps us to be able to go through and to be more timely in our hiring and replacement process. Our own hiring processes versus having to go through the state can be more customized to meet our needs, emphasizing the local control that's necessary and community standards in our recruitment and screening and our hiring. With civil services become certainly more and more restrictive and fail to adapt in a long lag in the times. Dwindling test takers and overly restrictive rules, it has not kept pace with the changing demands of our society today. So the rate and pace of change necessitates a move away from civil service. And again, both Chief Sellon and Chief DeRogers have worked on with the union all of the rules and regulations that are going to be necessary for new people moving forward. So again, this is for everyone who from the past is grandfathered. This would be moving forward, that for new people we'd be hiring our own practices, and also hope for more diversity and more local candidates that can be, we want to be hiring the best and the brightest, and we also want to try to be able to make our departments more diverse. We can't do that under civil service. And also we've had difficulties when we're talking about lag in times. Sometimes a list ranging from your number one candidate will be out there for a couple of years, and it causes a huge disservice that we can't hire off the list because the candidates just aren't good enough of what we think of our standard for here in Mansfield, which creates overtime, backlogs, and that can go on for years. There's no need for that to happen. And so this is very beneficial for the community. We've bargained with both of our unions in police and fire. I thank them for their cooperation, in addition for the hard work and determination of both of our chiefs and our management staff who've made this possible to get to this point in time. So we thank everybody involved in that process, and that we're hopeful for support for the removal of civil service, so both the fire department in Article 25 and also for the police department in Article 26. Next slide, please. Now we get into our citizens petitions. So Carrie, do we have our citizens petitioner for the Willowdale Estates subdivision? Do you know if the person's with us tonight?
I am not sure of the person's name that's supposed to be here for that.
Okay, so there's a public outcry right now. So this would be for Article 27 if you are the petitioner. This would also be for Article 28, which is Julia Lane and Lorraine Way. And then also for Article, I don't know if it's also 29. 1 second, please. No, it would just be for 27 and 28 for those streets. And so these are just street acceptances. Our checklist has been gone through, and they're ready, and they're being petitioned for us to take over officially as town streets. Going once, going twice, 3 times. Article 29, Carrie. This article is to be passed over, and this was in regards to Chauncey Street rezoning. That's being passed over, so that's something that's not going to be taken up. Also, Article 30 was withdrawn, so that's not going to be something that we're going to be taking up at this town meeting at all, which brings us to Article 31. So the Article 31, to see if the town will amend the town zoning bylaw, Schedule 4.2B as in boy, for density and dimensional regulations. Do we have our citizens petitioner with us here tonight for those recommended changes for your citizens petition? Going once, going twice.
Hello?
Yes, is this Article 31?
Oh, nope, I'm Article 32.
Not there yet, hold on. So going once, going twice, we are now on to Article 32. So Article 32 is the change in Town Code Chapter 230, zoning, also known as our zoning bylaws, Article 4, 230-4.2A, density and dimensional regulations for residential districts. And so our petitioner is with us this evening, yes?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. My name is Kevin. Nice to meet you virtually. And at this point in time, if Carrie, if you want to be able to turn it over to the first page of the presentation, please. And I'll turn it over to you. If you could turn on your camera, please. And I am going to turn mine off.
Hello, so I am proposing a zoning bylaw amendment to the density and dimensional regulations in residential districts to add a note following that educational facilities and childcare facilities, in addition to standards set forth in the schedule of density and dimensional regulations, that the following standards shall apply. And I have minimum open space of 50%, maximum net floor area of 2,500 square feet, and maximum height structures of 35 feet. Mostly to be in line with the town of Mansfield. I found from the assessor that we are 94% at residential, and the average size home is actually smaller than 2,000 square feet. So I think that we need to, I'm proposing this to preserve and protect our neighborhoods, the character of our neighborhoods. And I found these regulations to be comparable to other towns, and I believe on the next slide, I have a few other ones. On the next slide, I am proposing the 2,500 max. Thank you. These are some other towns that have bylaws specific to educational facilities, and I believe that Mansfield needs to follow suit in order to protect our character, the character of our neighborhoods. There's a few others too. There's many more, but I gave about 7 or 8 towns. And that is why I'm proposing this zoning bylaw amendment. Trying to be quick to the point right now.
Carrie, can you turn to the next slide, please? And petitioner, do you have any more to say on your citizens petition?
No, I don't.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for your time tonight, and thank you for being with us. Carrie, we're going to move on to Article 33, which is our last citizens petition for tonight. It's our last article. This is what was filed, and it's in regards to fluoride. Hi, Thomas. Good evening. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me?
We certainly can. Welcome. And at this point in time, I'll turn this over to you for your citizens petition, sir.
Excellent. So it's Article 33. And good evening. My name's Tom Urantian. The petition is to ask the Town of Mansfield voters to stop adding fluoride to our public drinking water. And why now? Well, it's been 30 years since we started the process, and I think on issues like this, we should at least reconsider them every 30 years. So my next slide. Next slide. So my family has lived in Mansfield since 1986. We enjoyed 9 years of pristine, clean drinking water before fluoride was added. Our drinking water comes from several wells that access deep aquifers. My background is in chemical engineering, economics, and graduate in business. I started an environmental consulting firm 30 years ago, the same year as our town meeting that moved fluoride ahead. We focus on environmental consulting, renewable energy, and solid waste management. So during the town meeting in 1991, a Mansfield resident who was also a dentist, actually my dentist, was standing next to me, and he stated during the town meeting that it's really important to add fluoride to our drinking water to reduce cavities. And then he went on to threaten to sue the town of Mansfield if they failed to add fluoride to our drinking water, which really didn't go over well. But regardless, the town brought it to a vote, and fluoride addition passed by a few votes with very little discussion. During the 90s, we brought up 3 children, and I looked into fluoride, and I felt that the risk wasn't worth taking with our children. So for the last 20 years, our family's been purchasing drinking water from Simpson Springs, which is water derived from an aquifer in Easton, Mass, next town over. Next slide, please. So what have we learned after 30 years? Well, the original scientific literature called the Framingham study from Framingham, Mass, that was the basis for the dental group to nationwide put forth fluoride. That study's been debunked. They basically said that fluoridation in their study by ingestion prevented teeth decay. But they neglected in their study for people that brush teeth with fluoride. So fluoride scientifically is really only effective topically. That means if you brush your teeth, fluoride protects your teeth from decay, not ingestion. And by the way, ingestion is probably the most ineffective delivery system for putting fluoride for protection. 99+% of the fluoride that is put into Mansfield water is not ingested. It goes down the toilet. It goes to watering lawns. Goes to washing clothes. So it's a very ineffective and cost ineffective way of delivering fluoride. Scientists in the 1950s also said that fluoride was an essential nutrient. That has also been debunked in the last 20 years. Fluoride is not an essential nutrient. Your body does not need fluoride. Many studies over the last 30 years have found that fluoride is a known neurotoxin. It accumulates in the pineal gland. Your pineal gland is also known as the third eye. It provides intuitive intelligence. It atrophies that gland, and it harms intuitive intelligence. Children and other vulnerable populations that are overexposed to fluoride harm developing brains. Fluoride does increase bone mass, but that bone mass that's increased is of poor quality. And there's also an increased risk for underactive thyroid gland. Fluoride is more reactive than chlorine. So that's the second thing we put in our drinking water supply is chlorine to kill bacteria, to keep it sanitary. Our water department samples many fluorinated organics, chlorinated organics, because chlorine interacts with organics. But fluoride is more reactive than chlorine, but yet we do not test for fluorinated organics that may be bad for us, and we just don't know. And that's another risk. In 2015, we used to have a standard of 1.2 parts per million of fluoride in our drinking water. The U.S. Public Health Services lowered that standard by 40% to 0.7 parts per million. This is what happens with science. It's reviewed every now and again, and they've found that level was too high. So they lowered the bar by 40%. There is now a suit against the U.S. EPA in California federal court, and EPA is trying to defend themselves by ignoring current science deliberately. But that trial may be resolved this summer, and it may be prohibited in the United States altogether if successful. Next slide. So what are other nations worldwide doing? Most developed nations in the world prohibit adding fluoride to drinking water. The U.S. has the most people in the world that are exposed to drinking fluoride, 2.5% to be exact. Of the total world, which is 7.4 billion people, 370 million drink artificially fluoridated water, or 5% of the world's population, and of that, 186 million U.S. citizens drink fluoridated water. So what are other nations doing, countries that we're familiar with that prohibit addition to fluoride? 97% of European countries, all of China, all of Russia, and many more. Next slide. So where does our fluoride come from? So we did some research. The distributor is in Fall River. It's called Borden Remington, a well-known chemical company. My company buys chemicals from them. It's very reputable. But where do they source fluoridation chemicals? Well, Mansfield is in a group of towns that pool their purchase of fluoride, and it comes direct from China. So Mansfield adds fluoride chemicals that are from China. And often sodium fluoride are byproducts from industrial processes that are classified as hazardous waste. And we're putting that in our water. It concerns me because China does not have the regulatory standards, monitoring or testing that even comes close to what we're used to in the United States. And we've all heard about, milk contamination of babies over there. My family avoids buying any food or beverage that originates from China for that reason. Yet we can't avoid China chemical products in our own drinking water because we put it in. And it costs Mansfield taxpayers money for the systems to put it in, the Chinese source chemicals, and I believe it has a negative value to us at a cost. Next slide. So why do we keep adding fluoride? I think it's really simple. I mean, once you start something, there's complacency. I mean, it's always difficult to look back and change. In some part because if you admit that it might not be good, it's an admission of wrongdoing. It's always difficult to admit. And I also believe that there's been a failure to review the recent 30 years of scientific research and what medical doctors are saying about fluoride in water. Medical doctors recommend us all taking vitamin C and vitamin D to boost our immune systems, but they don't recommend putting it in our water. That should be our choice. It shouldn't be mandated, and fluoride is mandated. Next slide. So, whatever you believe about the science of this, and there are pro-fluoride people and anti-fluoride people, but aside from that, it really should be your choice. We live in America. It's a free society. You should be able to choose whether you consume or ingest fluoride or not. And you should be responsible for yourself and your family. So let it be your choice and vote to stop public mandated fluoridation of Mansfield public water. I can take any questions. Thanks.
Carrie, do we have any questions out there?
I do not see any hands raised at this time.
All right, perfect. Thomas, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Excellent. Well, listen, folks, thank you so much. We're just approaching almost 2 hours. I really appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate the time of the staff who's joined us today, in addition to our citizens petitioners. Thank you all for taking interest in your government. We're here to do this for you. We're really proud to be in a position where, we run your town effectively and efficiently, and we do have a wonderful financial team in place, and you've got wonderful staff who really care a tremendous amount of what they do for you, our residents. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It's a call to action. Please don't forget us. We need your attendance because without you, town meeting simply can't happen. So again, it's the Xfinity Center, Xfinity, and it's at 885 South Main Street. It's Monday, 5:30 p.m. We're looking for a good weather day, and we need you present. And so we'll see you all again Monday, and we can't wait to see you. And thanks again. Have a great night. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.